I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona. I'm standing outside a brick Italianate style home which was built in the 1860s. This home was extensively renovated throughout the years for practical purposes. But in 1990, Greg Kowles, an antique dealer, purchased it, and he renovated it not only to its original splendor, but he made it more beautiful than it ever was. The earliest picture of the house was found in the Album of Winona, published at the turn of the 19th century by Jones and Krueger. It shows the house as it originally was. At this time, it was owned by S.C. White. Notice the unpainted brick, the pillared porch across the whole front, and a fence at the sidewalk that wraps around the house. In 1898, Dr. Kowles purchased the home and painted it white. The house remained in the Kowles family until purchased by Greg in 1990. Let's go in and meet Greg and take a look at this Winona treasure.
Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Greg.
In.
Walking in the double front doors, I had never encountered a spinning-handled doorbell before, nor a doorknob that looked quite this unique. It's made of multifaceted cut glass wrapped around a cavity filled with mercury, giving the look of shiny silver layered in petals, something definitely from the Victorian era. We enter the center hall with French doors on the left, leading to a parlor and extending on to arched doorways and interesting light fixtures. The woodwork has been tastefully painted and embellished with Victorian touches. From the hall, we go into the front parlor, which is stunningly beautiful. The antiques in this room are exquisite. I feel like I'm standing in a room in a southern mansion. We move to a lovely settee that sits under an arched doorway between this large parlor and a smaller parlor behind us. Greg, back in the 1980s, I think it was about 1989, there was an estate sale in this house, and I was in this house at that time, and it looked nothing like it looks today. So tell me about, you bought it, I think, shortly after that, and tell me what you did to the house at that point.
Well, you're right. There was an estate sale here. It was in the summer of '89. The house looked a lot different than it does today. Mm-hmm. Basically, I started by trying to figure out what the original floor plan of this house would have been when the house was built, because my goal when I bought it was to convert it back to the original floor plan. And over the years that it had been owned by two other families before I bought it, and there was a doctor's office in the back part of the house, and to incorporate a lot of the things that needed to be done to keep the private living quarters of the house separated from the doctor's office, the floor plan had been changed dramatically. So I toured several homes that were basically built in the same time period as my house to try to get a good feel for how this house would have been originally, and based on that, this is what I've come up with.
Now, I know you did extensive renovation on the outside of the house. I remember when it was painted a cream color, mm-hmm. and I don't remember such a beautiful porch. Tell me about your renovation of the outside.
Well, again, every square inch of this house has needed work. And when I bought the house, it had, from all indications, between 7 and 9 coats of paint over the brick. I started stripping the paint off the brick just to see how intact the brick was. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. When you take the paint off, you discover that that brick has been so well protected all these years, it's in beautiful condition. But it's very tedious stripping the paint off, and we were hand stripping it. Nothing real harsh like sandblasting. Everything had to be hand stripped so that it didn't interfere or damage the mortar or the surface of the brick. When I was in the process of stripping off the brick, I could tell that on the front of the house there were marks on the building where the original front porch was. And the porch that was on the house when I bought the house was a porch that was probably added in the 1930s. the original porch had probably rotted away years before. And so they rebuilt sort of a makeshift porch in the 30s that really was inappropriate style-wise to this house. And it only covered the front door. It wasn't a large, expansive porch like you see now. And typical of the Victorian era, porches were very massive, and they extended across the front. Sometimes they wrapped around the side. And each period during a certain era, for instance, the Victorian Italianate period, which is this house, has a certain style to their porch. Queen Anne has another style. And what I did is I spent 3 or 4 years just studying Italianate houses, and I would go to as many as I could find that still retained some elements of their original porch. And based on that, I determined what style porch pillars that I was going to make and how the ornamentation would come out on the house and the length of the overhang and the brackets. And so every little component I could substantiate by having examples of others that were still in existence. And based on that, I designed the porch, and Kim Mills and Mark Henningsgaard from Winona built it for me. And they had their work cut out for them because the blueprint was in my head. And they just kept asking me questions, and they did it right. Classic form or element of the Italianate architecture is on the very top rooftop of the house. There was a flat area, and the roof would come up, sometimes a mansard roof, and that flat area on the top was called a widow's walk, and usually it was framed with what they call a rooftop fencing, okay? And it was called a widow's walk because, as the folklore would go, a steamboat captain's wife or a ship captain's wife would walk to the top of the house and look out over the river or over the ocean, wondering whether her husband was actually coming back from sea. The ironwork on the top of my house, as well as the ironwork on the front porch, it's all matching ironwork. I had that custom cast at a foundry, but I copied it off of a New Orleans antebellum era plantation house. And in the South, iron was very popular as an alternative form of construction material, because down there they have such a severe problem with termites and rotting, and it's so moist down there. One of the main reasons why my original porch didn't exist was probably because it rotted. And so I wanted that same look of that southern plantation type house, so I went with iron.
And then I see you carried the theme over to your carriage house as well. You had the wrought iron on your carriage house.
Yeah, it's called a rooftop cresting. And in the center of that, I've got an Indian weather vane that swings around in the wind.
And I noticed you have a design even on your roof.
It's a man-made, manufactured slate. What I did was I photographed a Victorian house that I really loved the roof line and the design in the roof. And it was a house from the East Coast. And I adapted the pattern of the different shapes of each slate shingle and the different colors to create what I have on there. There's diamonds inset into the rooftop.
It's a wonderful design. Now, is your carriage house complete?
The exterior of it is. I fixed that up last year and repainted it, put a new roof on. And I had thought at some point it'd be ideal for an apartment or something. But the inside is still, it's just for storage. But I have the exterior finished. I went so far as to, I even had all the windows rebuilt, and I made sure that in order to keep it authentic, I didn't want any new glass in my window panes. So I salvaged every piece of old wavy glass that I could get, so that when you look at that carriage house, you see all the wavy glass in the windows, and you know, your assumption is it's all still old.
Now tell me about your fence as well. I understand that the fence is not original to this house.
No, the iron fence that you see around the outside of my yard, it is an antique fence, and I had always wanted to put a fence around the house because I like the way that sort of frames the property. And I had been looking for years for iron fence, and I required around 200 feet to do what I wanted to do. And here and there I would find 100 feet or 75 feet, And iron fence comes in just a multitude of patterns. And I was always afraid to buy 100 feet of this, wondering if I'd ever get another 100 feet of the same pattern. And I got a phone call one day from somebody who I had told that I was looking for fence, and he said, I've got enough fence to do your property. And so I lucked out and got what I needed. And of course, like everything else, it needed extensive restoration too. In addition to restoring the house, I focused very hard on the same era that the house was built. The 1860s, which was kind of at the height of the Victorian era, is the same time period that the majority of all the fixtures and the furniture of this, in the rooms that we'll be seeing are of that same period. And my goal was to furnish each room and do them in probably the grandest style of that time. And so everything that you'll be seeing is of that period, including all the chandeliers and furniture. When I bought the house, there was a wall practically where we're sitting dividing this room from the room behind us. Mm-hmm. The room behind us was the reception room for the doctor's office, and this was the family living room. And I took that wall out to open up these two rooms to make it the classic double parlor that was typical in a Victorian home at the time. This archway was in an upstairs bedroom, and I'm not sure whether it had been removed from this spot and planted up there or whether it was original to there. But I discovered that it worked very well here, so I took it out of that upstairs room and situated it here. I've studied how the great craftsmen of the 18th century, the 19th century, constructed furniture, from hand dovetailing to carving. And I'm a real fan of great accomplishments in furniture. And it's just the hands-on and working with wood is what I enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk right about this room that we're sitting in now. We're sitting in one of the main parlors here. Tell me about the pieces in here.
This is a secretary that dates to about 1855. It was made probably in Cincinnati by the Mitchell and Ramelsburg Furniture Company. It's made out of mahogany. It retains its original finish. What's unusual about it, it has a marble deck across the top, which you don't normally see on a piece of furniture that's used as a desk. Mm-hmm. At the top of the secretary, it's got a bust of Shakespeare carved. So this piece could have been in a library or in an office of some sort. The same era with this couch, it's Rococo Victorian, about 1860. It's got carved birds, which is a very unusual form. I love birds. It's got a nest in here. This is made out of walnut. This break front over here is actually part of my dining room set, but I didn't have room for it in the dining room, so I elected to keep it out here as a display cabinet, and I've got some art glass pieces that I've collected over the years in there. But again, it exemplifies the tremendous ability of the carver who made that piece. The doors on this break front are made of one piece of wood, and the ducks and birds and fruit and stuff that you see carved on it are carved out of the solid. It's not glued up stock, and they didn't add like the little plaques and stuff on later. They started with one huge chunk of wood and kept removing material until that's what they got. This particular armoire, again, it's in the Rococo flavor, which is the mid-Victorian. There's not a lot of armoires in that era. And so I was really lucky to find this one. It's got what they call a Napoleonic top, where it arches up like Napoleon's hat. It's got two doors. It's got carved grille work with mirrors on the front. Again, it's original finish and dates to about 1855 to 1860.
Mm-hmm. What about the chairs?
It's a very commanding chair. I always comment to people that whoever is sitting in that chair, everyone pays attention to what that individual is saying, because you command authority. That chair is just, it's very powerful. Mm-hmm. It's late 1800s, and remarkably, that chair still retains its original upholstery. That settee is made out of solid rosewood, and As a lot of antique collectors or dealers know, rosewood was a very scarce commodity. It was an expensive wood to use back in the Victorian era, and it was only found in Brazil or Honduras. And they had to import it, and so consequently the furniture that they made out of rosewood was very expensive furniture. That settee is from about 1860. That corner cabinet is a Victorian walnut curio or etagere that they call it. An etagere is just the French term for whatnot shelf, where people could display some of their wares like little glass pieces and porcelain. Surprisingly, when I bought that corner cabinet originally, it had about 4 coats of white paint. And I had to strip in and out of all that carved fretwork and the grill work on it, but it came out very nice.
So you strip a lot of this furniture yourself?
Yeah, if it needs it, but as they say today, if you can keep it in original finish, that's where the market is headed, because people want things untouched. This carpet dates to about 1900. It had been folded up and in a trunk in an attic for years and years, and it shows no wear, and it's just remarkable. And the interesting thing about this carpet is that it's reversible. The back side has the contrary colors to what we're seeing on the front. So on this side where you've got the dark green and the light beige, if you flip it over where there's the dark green, you're seeing beige, and when there's the beige, you're seeing the dark greens.
This light fixture in your living room here is spectacular.
Yeah, all of the lighting in my house is, again, from the Victorian period. I searched long and hard for the proper fixtures for each room. This particular fixture is a rare 6-arm gas fixture. They call them a gasolier. It was made in New York City about 1855, and it was originally a gas fixture where you had to turn on the gas and light them. I've since had it rewired for electricity.
This house has quite a story. Really, it's amazing, all the detail and tender loving care you've put into it. Let's walk around and take a closer look at the rooms.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure.
Well, Greg, now we're going to move into, I assume this is the second parlor?
Yep, second parlor or back parlor, they call it. And this room, when I bought the house, this was the reception room for the doctor's office.
Okay.
And in order to coordinate it with the front parlor and make it, you know, a continuous theme, this is what I came up with. I took that wall out that we mentioned that was here, I put in this archway, and pretty much designed these 2 rooms to flow together.
And they certainly do very nicely. And the window is similar to the windows in there, except it's a bay, but the way you have it dressed is similar. Yep. Let's walk over here to the bay window, Greg. I love the valance, the wooden valance that you have in front of the bay. Was that original to the house?
It's not original to the house, but it is of the same period. It's all hand carved out of mahogany, and from the antique dealer that I bought it from, he told me it was taken out of a Victorian house in Massachusetts. And I spotted it in his shop one day and thought, I have the perfect spot for that. And I was hopeful that it would fit, you know, the size, and it did. And a lot of Victorian houses had similar stuff to that, but usually you only see them in sort of a stick and ball style, which was more typical of the 1880s, 1890s, and this was a much earlier Rococo one, and so I was really lucky to get it.
Oh, it's fabulous. And your sconces on the side, the prism sconces, those are exquisite right there. Were there always sconces there?
No, I added that because, again, in a Victorian bay window, you often saw either gas sconces or oil sconces to sort of illuminate that bay window. Those 2 sconces are probably the oldest fixtures in this house. They date to about 1830, 1840, and they were originally oil. That tank that hangs below, which is inside the prisms here, this held oil, and they'd have to be hand lit. However, I was able to string a wire around there, and I had them electrified.
They hang right over this lovely settee.
This is actually a 5-piece parlor suite that was made in New York City in about 1860, and it was made by the firm of John and Joseph Meeks, and they were very accomplished cabinet makers of that time. It's made of rosewood, it has original finish, and it has the settee the 2 ladies' chairs, and a pair of gentlemen's chairs.
It's spectacular. And of course, they look lovely over your floor, and it looks like you have a mahogany strip throughout your oak flooring. Is that something that was original? Or?
No, that I put in. Most of the floor in this room was lacking. The center part here, it had plywood, and then it had several layers of linoleum and tile. And as I stripped down one layer after another, I got to the point where I was down to the original wood floors, but the only part of it that was left was the little border that remained around the bay window and in front of the fireplace. And I decided to frame it in those 2 stripes of mahogany to sort of set off the shape of the floor.
Great idea. And then you have an oriental rug that fits right into the center of the shaping that you created here.
Yeah. I had to find the rug the right size because I didn't want to cover up any of the border.
I love the way it flows and stays right in front of your beautiful fireplace. Now tell me about that. Is that original to the house?
No. Again, there was a fireplace in that spot, but it was a fireplace that had been put in and changed in the 1930s. It was a brick fireplace, and it was really a castle-looking fireplace. It wasn't appropriate at all for the house. I had been to an antique shop in Illinois, and he had this marble fireplace all in a heap. All the parts and pieces to it were laying there, and I started putting it together to see what it would look like. And I said, well, that's what I want, but I didn't have the measurement with me of the size of the wall where my fireplace went. Well, I took a chance and I bought it, and I couldn't wait till I got home, and I stood it up in the spot, and it was exactly the size,
like it was
because
made
they're all
for it.
different sizes.
This is a lovely little side table that you have here with some wonderful, interesting gold china on it. Is this something significant?
Well, that's a gold leaf tea service. It's porcelain that has been gold leaf. That's 24 karat gold that is done over the top of the porcelain. And it was made in Germany.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it dates to about 1900, that set.
It's lovely. And how about the little lamps?
The lamps are what they call cranberry cut to clear. And if you look at the etching on the font part of the lamp, you can see that where the glass cutter cut his design in, it's clear. And that's because this glass is made in layered. It's called cased glass, where they have the cranberry over the top of the clear glass. And when they cut through the cranberry, then all you see is the clear part. And it was very difficult to cut that. You make a mistake, and then you have to start over. You have to throw it away. Those lamps date to about 1840 or 1850.
Above the lamps hangs an oil painting of a little boy from the Victorian era, captured in a moment of guilt for breaking a vase. The frame, the lamp, the gold leaf dishes, the parlors, all fulfilling Greg's goal of furnishing the house in the grandest style of the 1860s. Join me next week when we take a tour through the rest of the rooms in Greg's spectacular Victorian home. This has been Joyce Woodworth. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona. Hello, I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona and the second part of the tour of Greg Kowles' Victorian Italianate home. In last week's show, we learned about the history and the restoration of the home and took a tour of the parlors. Today, we take a tour of the rest of the home. Wow, this is a spectacular dining room.
Yeah, this is the dining room. The dining room in a Victorian house was oftentimes the focal point of activity, and dining rooms were very large back then because that's where the family would gather and everybody would, sit around and share what they did for the day. This dining room was smaller when I bought the house, but it's now back to its original size. In this corner here, there was a bathroom where the grandfather clock sits, and there was a closet here. And the wall that separated this part of it from this part came right through here, so it made the dining room much smaller than it is today. And I wanted that expansive dining room, so I tore that closet and bathroom out to make it, you know, back to its full length again. Well, this clock is actually, it's English. It's from about the 1880s and very massive and stately in its style. Typical of a lot of English furniture and furniture of that period, you see the carved lion's heads. And they were pretty much like the protector of the domain. And so you've got lions carved here, and also you've got this winged sphinx type lady that sits up here, which is sort of an aesthetic movement style. This clock incorporates, you know, a lot of elements. It's got 3 weights, it chimes, and what's really interesting about it is it still has its original mercury pendulum. That vial in the middle of that is filled with mercury, and it's supposed to keep the pendulum swinging more balanced so that it keeps better time. The molding in here is the only molding that is not original to the house. The moldings that we saw in the parlor were the remnants of what I had left to work with when I was remodeling, that both came out of this room and in the parlors, but I only had enough to do those rooms. So in this room, I had found that center ceiling medallion at an antique shop in Cincinnati, and that's an antique medallion. And I had that prior to the cove molding, and I was looking through one of my renovation supply catalogs, and I saw this cove molding that had the same sort of floral garland swags on it that that medallion had, and I thought, well, that's what I'm going to put in here.
You have some wonderful antiques on this table as well.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they see the dining room, they ask, is this always set up like this? And it is. It was a very popular Southern tradition that the dining room was always set up, and it was a way that a family could show off a lot of their better silver and china instead of having it packed away in a closet somewhere. And you always wanted to be prepared at the spur of the moment in case guests came over that you could entertain them. And so the tables were very often set up at all times. The china that you see sitting here is all hand painted. It's floral painted china, and it's from Paris. It's called Old Paris porcelain. And this dates from about 1830 to 1840. Each place setting is a variation of the same theme and done in different colors. This one happens to be pink. We've got a yellow one over there, another light pink, and a salmon color. But I like to collect odd type of serving pieces. I always quiz people. What is this?
Oh, it looks like it's a toast grabber.
Oh, very close. It's actually for serving sandwiches.
Oh, okay.
From the Victorian era. Again.
Every house should have one of those.
Yep. On this end of the table, you've got that sort of a barrel-looking piece of silver with the 2 foxes sitting on the end of it. Do you know what that is?
Well, it looks like a really big napkin ring holder.
That's exactly what it is. It's a napkin ring holder. Yep, and they came in all different forms, sometimes with people, sometimes with animals.
Tell me about the china hutch in the back.
Okay, that is actually the companion piece to the big break front that we saw in the front room. And again, it's got the carved birds down below. And oftentimes they're called a hunt board or a sideboard. And they were used during a feast. If you didn't want to clutter your table with all the food would be set out on platters on the hunt board, and you were served from that. And when you're not, serving food, then it is a great place to put china or glassware on it.
And your glassware collection, Greg, is spectacular. I especially love the wine glasses up at the top with the little men as stems.
Yeah, that's actually their Lalique, and it's a set of 6. And that's Napoleon. Napoleon is actually in the stem of the glass, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the kitchen and see the next room.
All right. When I was thinking about doing my kitchen and the family room area here, I wanted it to be a little less intimidating as maybe the parlors are very formal. And I wanted this to be a more casual, kind of a country setting back here. So a lot of the stuff that I chose for back here is country-made things, a lot of pine, butternut furniture. This particular cabinet, it's Norwegian. Again, it's from about 1850 or 1860, and what you're seeing now was under about 6 or 8 coats of paint. And this was painted inside and out. And I stripped it down to the original wood and refinished it. But I love the style of it. It's got a lot of architectural things, like with the blocking on the panels and this, and the dental work, which is below the crown molding. So it's typical of what you would have seen maybe in a farmhouse or in a country type home, and this would have been their kitchen cabinet. And I use it more for displaying some of the things I collect. And the one thing that I like to collect Winona related things, and I've got a graduated set of these jugs by the Griesel Brothers Liquor. And this is the smallest one that they made. This is the quart size. From there it goes up to a ½ gallon, and then up here you got a 1 gallon, and then over here I've got a 2 gallon, and I think they also made a 3 gallon and a 5 gallon. But this is the prize of the collection right here.
You have a wonderful collection of many things in here. You have some rabbits and...
This is all cast iron, little cast iron toys and stuff. Yeah, almost everything in here is also from the same time period as the furniture that I collect. When I was designing this room, I didn't want a lot of built-ins. I wanted it to be a little bit more casual with freestanding cupboards that I could rearrange periodically. And so that's why I've got 3 hutches in here.
Tell me about the hutch in the corner, and especially about the collection of dishes that you have in that hutch.
Well, that hutch is, of all 3 of these, the oldest. Okay, that dates from the late Chippendale era. It's closer to around the year 1800 is when that was made, and it's made of walnut, and I use it to house my collection of flow blue porcelain and china.
It's very pretty. The colors are really nice in here. Very
yeah,
soothing.
It works well. I had this border around the ceiling stenciled that is actually copied off of an authentic stencil that was found in a historic house in the East, and I used the exact colors that the original had, and it's kind of a medium grayish green and then that burnt orange. And so I chose other things throughout these rooms that had those same colors, like on the gas fixture, the carnival shades, and on that arts and crafts fixture, again, the carnival shades that help accent and coordinate with that orange color.
A little bit of an orange tint. Well, let's move into the what you call the family room.
Well, this settee is from around the turn of the century. It's actually Victorian revival. It was made in the very tail end of the Victorian era. It's French. The tapestry, I had it covered in this. There's a coordinating chair over here that goes with it. But again, it carries through a lot of the themes that I have throughout the rest of the house. It's got birds on the arms. This is like a swan that creates the arm. It's got birds back here, and the chair's got a pair of birds in the crest.
Oh, you have to tell me about the lady in the corner. That's a spectacular lamp.
Yeah, that is actually a newel post lamp, which would have been at the base of a staircase. It would have sat on top of the newel post, and it was originally gas, and it's what would have illuminated the staircase as you went up. And I don't know where it came from originally, but it had been removed and just used as a table lamp.
And tell me about the lamp on the table over here by your television set.
Well, that lamp is a reverse painted lamp, and it's a technique that was done where the glass panels that form the shade are painted from the underside. Consequently, they call it reverse painting. And they're quite hard to come by, and of course if you break a glass panel you're out of luck.
So I see you have oriental carpets throughout your house.
Yeah, every room has got a Persian rug of some sort, and I spent a lot of time trying to find the right size for each room and the right shape, and I didn't want to hide a lot of my wood floors with wall-to-wall carpet. but I wanted the comfort of some type of a rug on the floor. And as you very well know, Oriental rugs last forever, and they improve with age. The more they're intended to be walked on, and the more you walk on them, the tighter the knots get, and you just can't wear them out.
Tell me about your little table here. This is a lovely little
yeah,
table,
this is the
perfect
coffee
for the
table.
settee.
It's from the same period as the settee. Not quite as old as the rest of the stuff in the house, but it's all hand carved. And as you can see, the pattern on the inset is all done with inlay. And coffee tables in this era were not only used in front of a settee just to drink tea and coffee with, but they were also used as a serving piece. You could take the tray off and bring your tea or cookies or whatever you wanted into the room and just set it back in place.
Now this is a little alcove that we have to pass through from your family room to your
to the
dining
parlor
room.
or the kitchen.
And this is a very interesting painting here.
Yeah,
Tell me about this.
Joyce, this is one of my favorite paintings that I have, and it's actually not antique, but I was so captivated by it. It was painted by a local artist from Winona, Henry Marsh, and he's still living today. And it's actually a self-portrait of him. That's a portrait of Henry. And he gave me this painting after I bought this house because he knew the doctor that owned this house years ago. And this painting is called The Country Doctor. And here he's treating a patient that's either hungover or sick from something. And it really reminds me of what the back part of this house looked like before I bought it.
It's so appropriate. And I understand that the trunk was also made by him?
Made by Henry also. Yep, it's all hand-tooled with copper, and I use it as a wood box.
And what a wonderful place to display it, right in the doctor's office.
Right.
Greg, you've really chosen a massive piece to put here in your hall. Can you tell me about this big picture?
Well, this picture ended up here by default.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't find a wall large enough to handle it because throughout my parlors, I've got a lot of windows, and any wall space I had pretty much designated furniture for. And for the longest time, this painting hung above my fireplace until I found the right mantle mirror to put above that. So this was the only wall that I really could find that was suitable to hang this painting. And so I chose to put it here, and I've sort of created a theme based around the era of the painting. And the painting dates to about 1780. It's a portrait of a gentleman by the name of Don Bernardo de Galvez. And he was the first governor of Spanish Louisiana from 1777 to 1785. The console table below it is from the Empire period, which is about 1830 to 1840. It's mahogany. But what's unique about it is on this frieze board below the deck, it's a hand-stenciled and gold leaf design. And it was a way that you could create a pattern on the wood without the tediousness of inlay. And so they chose to do it by stenciling this decoration along the edge. And then they highlighted some of the carving on the feet as well in gold leaf. This setting here is sort of a departure from the Victorian of the rest of the house. So I tried to keep this sort of its own little theme.
Well, Greg, we're standing now in your downstairs bedroom, and it's a lovely design, lovely decor in here, and I especially like your wallpaper with the birds on. Is that sort of a Victorian look, or is that something that's modern?
Well, this wallpaper is actually, it's a period wallpaper that was introduced by a wallpaper company at about the time that I bought the house and was redoing this room. And it was a wallpaper that was discovered in a house in Indiana after they had peeled back several layers of wallpaper. It was the first layer that they had discovered on the wall of this house that dated back to about 1870, and the company decided to reproduce it for a limited time, and I just was enchanted by it. So I decided to order it and put it in here, and after I hung the wallpaper in here, I decided to create the entire room with a bird theme. And so I've got a reverse painted lamp here, which also has a pair of parrots, perched on a branch there, which picks up a lot of the same colors and the theme from the wallpaper. The chandelier hanging here is an 1865 to 1870 period gas chandelier, which also has a bird perched in the center of it. either a stork or an egret, again, is part of the bird theme.
I find the dresser in the corner very interesting. What really entices me are the keys in the center in the drawers. Were those keys original to the dresser?
Well, if you notice, this particular piece of furniture has no handles that you can pull the drawers open. And the only way that you could get into it was by pulling with the key. And oftentimes, you may find a piece of furniture that has handles on it that aren't original, and you may ask, well, what did this piece have originally? Well, it may not have had any because the design of that was never intended to have, handles sticking out. You were to see the beautiful grain of the wood and use a key to open the drawer. But over the years, that becomes kind of awkward and cumbersome. If you lose the key, then you're always fumbling, well, what can I stick in there to pull the drawer open? So people will add handles, but this never had them originally.
Interesting. And I noticed the shell on the top goes with the shell design in the bed itself. Was this part of the bed?
Well, when I bought the bed, the dresser was actually not part of the set. And I was looking for a companion piece of furniture to complement the bed, and I wanted to try to create it with that shell carved on the headboard. So I found this dresser that also has that carved shell, and the two pieces are actually made of the same wood. It's crotch green mahogany, and they're almost from the same era. The bed dates to about 1830 to 1840, and the dresser dates from about 1840 to 1850. They're very close in age, and I thought they complemented each other pretty well.
They certainly do. And Greg, tell me about the dress over here against the wall.
It's a Chippendale chest of drawers, and it's called Chippendale because it's got that very pronounced claw and ball foot that most people familiarize themselves as the Chippendale style. The edge of the molding along the bottom matches the edge at the top, and it's got kind of a petal carved, and that's called gadrooning. And that was popular again in the Chippendale era. This chest was reputed to have come from the family of Daniel Boone, and it was offered to me for sale years ago when the family needed money, and they had presented me with this chest and wanted to sell it. And apparently from the story that was told to me, it was a gift to the Boone family from a general who had fought in the Revolutionary War, and it had descended through their family until I acquired it about 15 years ago. And it dates to about 1775.
Greg, this would be a good time to ask you now. You seem to know the dates of all your furniture. How do you decide the date of a piece of furniture?
Well, most furniture falls into real strict style categories. And first you have to familiarize yourself with what characteristics of a piece of furniture make it Chippendale, what make it Queen Anne, what make it Victorian. And based on that, you can sort of tell the style. And that gives you a time frame of when that style was popular. But that's only part of the story because people have copied that style year after year. So then you have to look deeper and pull out the drawer and see if it's hand dovetailed, whether it's made out of machine nails or handmade nails. So there's a lot of clues that can tell you whether it's a legitimate period piece or one that maybe was duplicated or replicated years later. It takes a lot of time and a lot of experience. You really have to pull pieces apart. The one painting that's against the wall here is probably the earliest painting that I own. It dates to about the mid to late 18th century. It's not by any known artist that I know of. I couldn't find a signature on it. However, it's just an early portrait of a woman in her period dress of what was popular at that time.
Okay, and how about the enchanting little boy above the Chippendale?
He must have been from a very prominent family because portraits were generally expensive to have done back then. Of course, photography hadn't been invented yet, so the only way families had records of what their relatives and family looked like was to have a portrait painted. And to have a professional come in and paint your child was considered, quite prestigious. And you can tell just by the look on the kid he was destined for for something, pretty famous.
Well, Greg, it seems like every piece you have in this house has a story behind it.
They all do, yeah.
Well, let's move on upstairs and see your room upstairs.
Okay.
At the top of the stairway, we pass an arched pocket in the wall that contains an Art Deco vase with a beautiful painting of a purple peacock. The landing at the top opens into a lovely sun-filled room. A Persian rug lies on the pine wood floor, and an asymmetrical love seat decorates the hall. This settee is very unusual, with a lounge back on one side and a chair back end on the other. Behind the wall at the top of the stairs lies 2 apartments, one of which contains the only original fireplace left in the house. It's a white marble design very much like the one Greg replaced in the dining room when he renovated the house in the 90s. Greg, now we're actually in your bedroom, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
The upstairs bedroom.
The upstairs bedroom. And this is a wonderful bedroom. We've got some wonderful furniture in here as well. Describe this interesting piece right here for us.
Well, this is actually a Victorian Rococo fold-open secretary. Dates to about 1850 to 1860. It's made out of walnut and this figured or burled walnut on the panels. Also, it's got the same kind of a feathered walnut on the drop lid, and it opens up just by, folding this open, and then you've got a writing surface here. You've got a series of drawers across here. On the inside, you've got more cubby holes and another bank of drawers.
Oh, what a beautiful desk.
And there's a secret hiding spot in here too. I've got the leather tab exposed, but when you lift that up, you've got another area back in here where you can hide your treasures.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful piece. And I noticed you have burled walnut over here on this piece over here. Tell me about this interesting looking piece.
This is actually a shaving stand, and you're right, it is burled walnut. Again, it's in the Rococo revival style. A lot of pierced carving. It's got a wonderful flower basket carved up at the top. Drawers here for your shaving items. This would have sat on top of a dresser, maybe a little taller Victorian chest, and a gentleman would shave in front of this. And it adjusts the tilt. And again, it's from about 1860.
It's beautiful, and it's on a wonderful piece right here. Now, does this match your bed and the dresser over here?
Okay, this is part of a 3-piece bedroom set. It's made out of rosewood. Rosewood was a very expensive wood. It's got a very dark finish, and the reason why it's called rosewood is when you cut into the wood or if you burn it, it smells like roses. It's got a really neat aroma to it. But yeah, the dresser and the bed are companion pieces, and then I've got a matching wash stand that went with it. This set was made by the Mitchells and Ramelsburg Furniture Company of Cincinnati. It dates to about 1865. It measures 9 foot 6 inches tall, which really makes it difficult for a house in the northern part of the country who didn't have high enough ceilings to fit it in. But fortunately, my ceilings are 9 foot 9, and so both pieces were able to fit in this room. And the bed is a full queen-size bed. And a lot of people didn't realize that back that far they had beds that were queen-size, and they did. A lot of the big mansions had beds that were huge.
Well, Greg, I noticed you have another very unique chandelier in this bedroom as well, and what's so unique about it is there are 2 types of metal on it.
And not only that, but 2 types of shades. First of all, the metal that you see, there's a brass-colored metal on there that is either brass or bronze, and the grayish-colored metal or gunmetal color is actually a metal that's called spelter, and it's a white metal that's made out of different alloys, and it was popular to have that contrasting color between the 2 metals. And this fixture dates to about 1880, and the reason why you see the 2 different shades is the shades that are pointing up are actually gas. Okay, the 3 arms that go up were fitted for gas, and then the 3 arms that point down were fitted for electric. And it was around the 1880s, 1890s era when electricity was first being introduced into houses, and companies that were manufacturing chandeliers were a little bit leery about the reliability of electricity. So they continued to make lighting with gas, but then they made some that had gas and electric, so that in case you had a power outage or something, you could always turn on the gas and still have light. That's a Chippendale chair, but it's not Chippendale in period. In period meaning that made during the time when Chippendale himself was popular, or in his time era. A real Chippendale chair dates to about 1750 to 1780. This happens to be a revival piece that dates to about 1900. And so this we term as a centennial, meaning it was made approximately 100 years after the original was popular.
Well, Greg, you've obviously put a lot of tender, loving care in absolutely everything you've done in this house. Do you think you'd do it again if you had a chance?
Oh, I'm not opposed to it, but I probably wouldn't take on one that needed quite as much attention as this one. I'm always attracted to orphans, and this was one, and it about took me out, but I'm pretty satisfied with how it came out.
Well, everything has been great, and I love all the stories behind every little detail that you have in this house. And I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Okay. And thank you for joining me. And please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona.